Today is March 15th, 2023. Go over today. I did attempt to go live, but the internet connection fell. But I'm sort of going with the whole digital nomad thing for the time being. You know, I'm on my Twitter feed. I'm looking at David Hogg driving a prototype lunar rover on his, it says for spring break. Oh, I guess he's in college. Well, yeah, he's driving around on this lunar rover, which is not all that impressive, but it's not a surprise. When you really go back and you examine these various characters, you'll find that it's all connected behind the scenes. The space faking industry is part of the school shooting faking industry. Same with the fake terrorism. It's all connected. They use the same backstage, same special effects, and they're all part of the same fictional universe. And when I say fictional universe, I mean this like in the literary sense, because the world stage is the real world that we live in, augmented by a script. And the script includes certain features that define the world stage universe, not unlike the Marvel universe. You can look at these different comics, these different comic book characters, and they may not know each other. The writers of these various stories, creators of these various characters may not know each other, but they all exist in the same fictional universe. You can also compare this to World Wrestling Entertainment. All of the wrestlers know it's fake. Most of the audience members are in a state of suspended disbelief. I mean, they know it's fake, but it's real enough. My point is, these various wrestlers are all in on the same basic con or illusion. And this illusion is the thing that binds them. They might be enemies from your perspective in the audience. They might be against each other, but they're all part of the same fictional universe where they're actually having these beefs that are being fought out on the mat. Now, this model does apply to the mainstream media and all of its principal actors, specifically those who have prominent roles in transformative psychological operations. The idea that a crisis actors exist is not a conspiracy theory, it's a fact. And the fact that actors and theater and special effects are a part of the nightly news eludes most people. Most people are believers, and their belief is grounded in faith. Anyway, David Hogg on a prototype lunar rover, and I suggested that maybe he's going up there because we can't allow guns in space. Bullets would obviously travel further, as they would fall slower because there's no air resistance. Keeping up with the crisis actors has been a thing of ours since 2018, and there's a reason we do so. What you're looking at with these actors are people inserted into the historical record. They exist more than we do, and they will forever exist. And these are the ones that are part of the big script. And most of them, I would say, are born into these roles. It's not like you can get picked. I think it's a closed movie set. And if you're not inside, well, you're in the dark. You're not one who has been shown the light. You're one of the profane. And we are the profane. It's one of the reasons why they resent conspiracy. They resent conspiracy theorists because conspiracy theorists have access to some of the light. They've got a clue. They don't like anyone having a clue. They don't like question marks. I'm surprised they haven't sent in the troops from the UN to rip the question marks off our keyboards yet. I've been expecting that for some time. Now, I'm sort of fatigued by this topic, but I'm going to address it one more time. I took some notes about this and I was just thinking, I could just nail this coffin closed. There's this premise behind this notion that everybody, as in everyone literally, in the elite and all their servants are part of this EGI. EGI, it's a conspiracy theory. This is probably the last time I'm going to address it. I published an article today, quote, "It's all of them." examining the beliefs of Christian transvestigationist witch hunters. I think this is the end of it, and I think you'll agree. First of all, when you criticize a group, you're not necessarily their enemy. Just because you say a group is questionable, their motives are questionable, maybe you doubt their methodologies, it doesn't mean you're their enemy. But if they see it so, then the group is a cult. Now, I ran afoul of the leading, quote, transvestigationists on Twitter simply by asking questions about their methodology. I was beset by cyberbullies obsessing over the shape of my face and how, according to their science, I am A, a woman, and B, a member of the Illuminati. Their immediate assumption: if you don't agree with us, you're the opposite of what you say, and you're in the cult. Well, their leader, and when I say leader, I mean the most influential, the ones with the biggest accounts. Their leader is arguably, it's Bevy112, and she has some underlings with some large accounts. And at one point, I believe she had 80,000 followers. But she mocked me, saying that my life, as in me being a Illuminati covert transgender, that my life would be difficult with, quote, such a secret. And the reason why she proclaimed that I was one of them is that their entire outlook is based on the premise that it must be. For it to be internally consistent, there couldn't be any outliers. Therefore, if you're a part of the cult or the elite, the cabal, or you're one of their servants, you are definitely one of them. There can be no other way. This is their mantra. Yes, the transvestigationists have a mantra. They all say, it's all of them. It can be no other way. Now, curiously, this is like malware for their minds, because now they don't process exceptions to their rule. They don't mentally process it. If they see an exception, they have a way of evading it. So this is a fact. This is a very important fact. Transvestigation is unfalsifiable. For example, a man has a smooth brow ridge, therefore he's a woman, by their logic. Now, if a man has a defined brow ridge, he's a woman with a prosthetic forehead, by their logic. You can't win. Another example, a woman has a pronounced Adam's apple, therefore she's a man. Now you have a woman on TV with no Adam's apple. Well, therefore she's a man with a tracheal shave. Another example, there's a critic is missexed by the transvestigators who cite his jawline. Smooth jawline. Diagnosis, that's a woman. Well, Brad Pitt is judged by transvestigators as being a woman, despite his jawlines. They say these are implants. So if the critic had a strong jawline, like let's say my jawline was like Brad Pitt's, they would say, I'm a woman with implants. You can't win with witch hunters. Once you're pre-convicted, you're pretty much always convicted. You're never going to be exonerated. They don't even want evidence. They're never wrong in their minds. I have one lady in her 50s stalking me on Twitter, asking for videos of me walking so she can examine my gait. Doesn't want pictures, just wants videos of me walking. Now, the contradictions they encounter no longer give them cognitive dissonance, but rather paradoxically prove them even righter. The other night, Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, was targeted by them. And this is kind of interesting too. It's funny because they think that Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, is JFK Jr. in a costume, like a synthetic mask and a wig, kind of a fat suit. Yeah, JFK Jr. is the pillow guy, according to the QAnoners. Because according to QAnoners, everyone is JFK Jr. or a deep state agent. And this is definitely a parallel in terms of their reasoning. Everyone that they see is potentially JFK Jr., and that's because their cognitive bias has them on the lookout. And if you're not familiar with this QAnon's obsession with the Kennedys, it's this idea that the deep state is about to be overthrown by the Kennedys, and JFK Jr. went underground and is fighting a covert war against them. But this is their go-to response. He's got to be, if he was, let's say for example, you're a neo-Nazi. If you're a neo-Nazi, you're going to look at the pillow guy and say, he's a Jew. If you're a transvestigator, you're going to say he's a covert transsexual. If you're a leftist, you're going to say he's a racist, sexist, misogynistic, uneducated person. In other words, we're looking at groupthink with this transvestigation phenomenon, and everybody outside of their group is one of them. And you can just dismiss their assessment overall as groupthink and consensus building. It falls short of science. And their only power as a cult is in outgrouping doubters, which is typical of cults. People are afraid to leave. They don't want to lose the affirmation. They don't want to lose the support. They don't want to lose the ability to just go into a room where everybody knows their name and agrees with them. Many don't voice disagreement because they don't want to be targeted. There are people who are very critical of Bevy 112, but are anonymous about it because they don't want their faces and bodies to be scrutinized by the cult. This is like I said, inquisitors, witch hunters. Nobody wants to be accused of being a witch, because if you're accused, you're guilty. If somebody with influence, somebody like Bev with tens of thousands of followers points at you and says, hey, that person's a witch, you'll have a lot of superstitious people looking at you. Now, the power of someone like Bevy is that of a demagogue surrounded by brainwashed cultists. Some, like Xmas Eve Evil, claim to be atheistic. They claim they're atheists, but their rhetoric is always intended to incite strong emotion. How can you claim to be an atheist if you're going to use rhetoric of a satanic panic or Pizzagate? And you could tie these in. I would tie in transvestigationism with satanic panics and Pizzagate. And similarly, these employ crowd-sourced research, and they put logically fallacious claims ahead of any attempts at discovering actual evidence that might prove their claim wrong. Again, this is not a science. At best, it approximates a pseudoscience, albeit in a mocking way, kind of like phrenology or something. This skull examination that they do is very rudimentary. And what we're seeing really is weaponized superstition. I mean, this is what it looks like to challenge the cult. A man on Twitter disagrees with the claim that the Pope is a woman, and therefore, the Twitter user is now deemed to be a woman by the cult. Or the man agrees that the Pope is a woman, and now he gets to retain his manhood in the eyes of the cult. There's a few of these cult members that I've really challenged to stand by their claims, and they do. They really do. They stand by it proudly. They're proudly confused. Now, I don't fear that they can take away my male status. They cannot imagine away any part of my body, no matter how badly they want to be right. What we're seeing is a group of confused people whose confusion has been weaponized. These superstitious religious zealots are waging a holy war against the world, and hunting and exposing witches is how they feel that they can win this battle. They're fighting a holy war. Now, if they weren't confused and delusional, they wouldn't organize around logically fallacious, broad generalizations. They wouldn't use guilt by association to missex their critics. Now, that phrase, the word missex, it's kind of new. What does it mean? They're not misgendering people. Like, they're not misgendering me. They're agreeing that I'm a male as presented gender-wise. They're saying that I'm a female biologically. Now, if, quote, it's all of them was true, and the only condition under which elite gender inversion could be true, and they say this, it can be no other way, then one single exception should debunk the rule. Just one. That's all it would take. When they say it's all of them, they mean every president, every first lady, all of their children. Now, it's not unusual to see these investigators confused by their own fingers, by their own finger digit ratios not matching the model because they believe, and this is their attempt at science, they believe that a longer ring finger than index finger is an indicator of a biological male's hand. However, they encounter contradictions, to which they default to it's Photoshop. If you see a celebrity that's presenting as a woman, but their ring finger is not longer than their index finger, it's Photoshopped. But if it is longer, it's proof that it's a man. So it's either a man or it's Photoshopped, and it's still a man. And this is the thing. They find exceptions to the rule when they look at themselves. I'm an example of this. Their methodology has concluded that I am a female, that I'm a biological female. They've concluded this. But if it's not true, then their entire theory is wrong. That's science. That's why they don't want to see what I look like in gym shorts. They want to look at me walking so they can argue about it and then conclude whatever their bias wants them to conclude. Now, these contradictions invalidate their essential claims. And if, as Bevy 112 and her cult argue, if all of the elite are part of it, what does it mean if their methodology is flawed? I mean, the fact that I'm a male without a Brad Pitt jawline, it doesn't make me a female, and it doesn't make me a male with jaw-shaping surgery. Like, I didn't change my jaw. I didn't have surgery. It just means that their analysis is wrong. But they won't see it unless they test it on themselves. And this is what's fascinating about it. It shows a total lack of insight. They cannot pass their own tests. I've seen Bev 112. Bev 112 could not pass her own examination. Now, it's always the others that are witches. You're safe. As long as you're making accusations, you're safe. And what we are witnessing here is a witch hunt. And it's important to remember that there are no atheists among the larger transvestigationist channels. This is purely a fringe internet Christian phenomenon. Mainstream Christian leaders are actually considered to be covert transgendered, from Joel Osteen to Pat Robertson. It's all of them. I follow this hysterical thread where Kooks, Bevy 112, James Johnston, aka Xmas Eve Evil 1. That's one of the Twitter accounts. This person is actually James Johnson, but he was attempting to explain to Bevy how Princess Diana is actually a biological woman. Now, this flies in the face of it's all of them. It invalidates their theory. So how do they explain it? Well, James was explaining to Bevy how Princess Diana is actually a biological woman who is transitioned into a male and then forced to transgender back to female. Similarly, they say Caitlyn Jenner was always a biological woman who transitioned to male before de-tranning back to her original sex. Yes, Caitlyn Jenner was always a woman. Now, you can add ad hoc fallacy to the mix of logical flaws in their assessment. Now, given how demonstrably wrong they are and how committed they are to the wrong answers, it's safe to say Christian transvestigationism is a cult. It's not a science. Only a cult can provide solace for those that are against reality, against facts, against reason and logic. These people are confused and bigoted strongly in a number of ways. You can see their racism whenever they transvestigate a black woman. They hate Jews. These are just facts. It's not a coincidence that I have been derided as a, quote, Jewish woman by one of the more virulent anti-Semitic ones, the transvestigationist Dave Johnson. And Dave, like many of these kooks, believes that he's witnessing for the Lord, spreading lies and defamation and gossiping on Twitter. It's all the Lord's work, apparently, for these online self-styled Christians. I was listening to this individual speak on a podcast recently, and he was trying to convince people that Pete Shea, he was talking to Pete Shea, And he was trying to convince people on Twitter that Pete Shea is actually faking his Irish accent and he's actually a woman. I mean, that's some great acting. Great acting. Amazing, though, how they're able to either lie to themselves, as in convincingly convince themselves of their own delusions, or it's amazing how great they are at just pushing inane BS. My question is why? If you're going to be a lying demagogue, why wouldn't you go with some more believable lies that don't make you look batshit crazy? It is crazy. It is bat guano crazy for Dave J to insist that I'm a woman. It is insane. And he knows it. And you know they're insane. They know they're insane, but onward they go because nobody's stopping them. These aren't the church-going type Christians. Like, I'm not trying to malign Christians. Christians are not a monolith, for one. Church-going Christians, generally speaking, and I know that's a fallacy, but generally speaking, they're far more social. They're far more tolerant, or at least kind, empathetic, because it's a social organization. That's what the church is. You can just set aside their doctrines, but just as an organization, it's a very positive thing, and you can say nice things, generally speaking, about church-going Christians. But online, self-styled Christians, by and large, are nasty. I have a lot of experience with this. Online, self-styled Christians are antisocial. And I think it's the online thing. And they're not representative. Like I said, it's not a monolith. Online, self-styled Christians are all about outgrouping the devils, the witches. They're on witch hunts. They're the witch burning type. They know they're crazy and they want to revel in it. They want to dance around a screaming, burning, innocent victim tied to a stake. That's what they want. You think nobody attends witch burnings? They love it when someone like Bev points out someone like me and they can pile on. And they can all throw in, oh, here's my proof, here's my proof. They feed off each other. It's a feeding frenzy. Now, witch hunts are an ancient phenomenon, but today they're still prevalent. India, New Guinea, Sub-Saharan Africa. But the psychology is the same. It's the dynamic between the witch hunter and the superstitious mobs that they whip up. And these mobs are always eager for a witch to burn, or in this case, transvestigate. Same psychology. Key point here. Weaponized superstition. And two, this is not falsifiable. If there's nothing that can contradict their essential claims, it's not a science. If it's not a science, then what is it? If it's not a legitimate attempt to arrive at truth, then what is it? And my observation and my experience with it is that what we're seeing here is a modern witch hunt, weaponized superstition, soft demagoguery. Moving on, and hopefully this is the last time, and you can read this if you go to timozman.blog. You can read It's All of Them. That's the name of the article. The IPR Press Club is now a thing. Infinite Plane Radio Press Club, I'm going to start reaching out to anybody with a press pass to go to the main website and click on the Press Club link and get on that newsletter. No need to jump at that now. If you're subscribed, you'll be getting notifications. We're working on now formalizing our media organization as such. And this is going to entail our press club, noting where we are geographically and setting up various ways that we can start covering events that are local to each person. For example, we had someone in Ohio at the site of the white noise themed PSYOP just to fact check, reality test the claims of the mass media liars. And look, they're liars. I don't mean it to be rude. It's not necessarily pejorative, but the mass media are liars, every single one of them. They're liars by default. And they're unwitting liars. They may not know it. Kind of like YouTube is unwittingly party to identity theft. Yeah, I'd say YouTube is a criminal organization from my perspective. Now, it's by default. You could say that they have some plausible deniability, but we'll see. I actually think they've defaulted on their responsibility to act. Side topic, don't want to get too much into it other than to say that the process is working and it's just a matter of days. I'm expecting results by likely the 20th. All right, let me run through my Twitter account. I do keep track of breaking news. The queen of QAnon, Queen Didaloo, and her team are getting loyalty money ready, establishing their own currency. They're not going crypto, though. The QAnon queen is not doing, they're not doing crypto, they're doing paper money. If you remember last summer, they were asking people to stop paying their electric bills because the Great Awakening was going to happen. And I guess after the Great Awakening, you don't have to pay your bills. This is from Newsmax. New report from the Pentagon researcher and Harvard astronomer suggests that an alien, quote, mothership might be sending UFOs to surveil the Earth. Pentagon report suggests alien mothership sending UFOs to Earth. Does anybody care? You know, it's like the boy who cried wolf. You can only cry wolf so many times. They've jumped the shark. They've cried wolf too many times. I don't think that anybody can be bothered. Not after this balloon thing. Benjamin Crump is on the scene here. This looks ominous. Mississippi lynching in 2022. Man found dismembered. I'll follow up on this. 25-year-old Rasheem Carter's wounds may have been caused by an animal. I'll follow up on that. But anytime I see Forrest Crump, I'm expecting some kind of a dramatic psyop to make the headlines. I mean, look, real things happen, bad things happen, people die, people kill. We know this. However, the ones that make the news are often, if not obviously fakeable, at least questionable. And you find the same coroner does the autopsy for Jeffrey Epstein, for Adam Lanza, for any famous death. It begins to, create something of a picture. And, Forrest Gump at all these majorly important historical events. Well, Forrest Crump, this attorney, Benjamin Crump, is at all of the psyops, from Astro World to George Floyd. I see him here posing with a skull. Yeah, I'm guessing something else is going on here. Again, I'm moving forward through my Twitter account. It's at Real Tim Osman. Andrew Tate denied bail. And he's assuming he's in jail, assuming this is real. I mean, you remember how this thing started. He was bragging about the carbon emissions of his 33 sports cars, and Greta responded to him. They got into a back and forth, and that pizza box was used by authorities to locate him. They found him and arrested him for sex trafficking, which is fascinating because, of course, pizza has been tied into that subject via Pizzagate. I mean, it just gets so weird that it's hard to believe that this could actually be real. Although I saw on Twitter that pizza is also a slang term for an 8-ball, a cocaine reference, which is kind of interesting to consider that the Pizzagators were talking about how the Democrats are trafficking children. Well, maybe they're just trafficking drugs. I almost find that more likely. Continuing, it's so insane, but our viewers believe it. Tucker Carlson producers quietly trashed Fox's audience. Yeah, they sent their audience into a frenzy and had them set up as patsies for a psyop on 1/6. They're all complicit. Listen to this. In a lawsuit against Fox News by Dominion Voting Systems, internal texts show the network expressed frustration with Trump's lies, but they still gave them airtime. Tucker Carlson's ex-producer called the election deniers, quote, terrorists. And this is where he gets to be both. This is his producer. This is not Tucker, although the headlines are misleading. But he gets a little specific here. He's not talking about Arab terrorists. He's talking about, quote, not Saudi terrorists. He says here, quote, it's like negotiating with terrorists. His name is Alex Pfeiffer. But especially dumb ones. Cousin effing types, not Saudi royalty. Tucker's producer refers to the J6 types as cousin effers. That's pretty bad. And that's not the worst of it. Even Rupert Murdoch said that they're not red, they're not blue, speaking of Fox News, that they're not there for political reasons, they're green. It's about the money. And they're probably going to pay out quite a lot. Okay, continuing. These are just some quotes from texts that have been leaked. But I think it's pretty clear that Tucker Carlson has nothing but disdain for his viewers. And I remember pointing out that Tucker had admittedly sent some sort of a letter to Hunter Biden, a very friendly letter, asking for a recommendation for his son to get into some private school. These people are all friends behind the scenes. You can also follow me at minds.com/infinite plane society. Now, there's this video going around of Tucker Carlson being very rude to a 9/11 truther. He said 9/11 truthers should be locked up. He called them parasites. And some people took offense to that. I mean, I would, in a way, thinking he's a journalist, and out of all people, you think a journalist would care about free speech a little bit, but I'm not surprised. But anyway, Jim 2020 on Twitter says, Tucker is rude and he has no Adam's apple. What you see here, and I've been observing truthers, I know what I'm looking at here. You're seeing a transvestigator. Not only is Tucker rude and a 9/11 truth denialist, but he doesn't have an Adam's apple, therefore he's a woman. That's the go-to response. But if he had an Adam's apple, let's say Tucker Carlson had a big fat Adam's apple, they would say, Tucker's rude, he's a 9/11 truth denier, and he has a nasty Adam's apple implant. Again, they're never wrong because they're transduced. We've been talking about the use of the word contagion and fallout with reference to the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. And it is all just part of the script. Right around 3/11, we have ourselves a new pandemic kicking off. Okay, Donald Trump tops iTunes charts, beats Miley Cyrus. I don't know if you heard it, but Donald Trump read the Pledge of Allegiance, and the J6 choir in the background performed, and somehow this managed to top the iTunes music charts. I'm going to go ahead and play it in the background here for just a moment. I'm sure it's utter cringe, like most MAGA rap. And I'm sure there's no way that they faked the numbers. I'm sure this is completely honest and 100% organic, that this is legitimately the top of the charts. Justice for All. J6. Prison Choir. It's the national anthem. And I believe about a minute in, Donald Trump Anyway, it's as bad as it sounds. Justice for All, J6PC. You know what? QAnon Shaman, now the American Shaman. He actually is called the American Shaman, americanshaman.com. His sister is hyping it up. Even Musk wants to release the shaman. It's like he's the only guy there that was armed. He had a spear. But the QAnon, and the thing is, the QAnon Shaman, he gets out in like 4 or 5 months anyway. He gets out this summer. Now, he would have been fine if he had stayed home. I had suggested, right at the beginning of 2021, I said, quarantine the 33-year-olds. They didn't do it. And Jake Angeli, the QAnon Shaman, was 33. I want to point this out, too. If you've been following my blog, I've been writing about Atlanta's Cop City protests and how they're modeled on Avatar 2, The Way of Water. And I brought up, when I first made this assessment, I said, hey, look, you're going to see the merger of eco-activism and anti-police BLM activism. It's all going to tie together. This is part of the Avatar 2 movie, what the subtext is. Well, I was not only right and vindicated, but in their last protest, they literally have the Black Power fist coming out of a tree trunk with a tree in the background. At first I thought it's the usual communist raised fist. And it's superimposed over a tree. And I'm like, this is exactly what I said they would do. Eco-activism merges with BLM. I called it before they even made that sign. This is just a side note. I've been talking about why we're calling the space agencies space fakers now. And I think that the space agencies need to start putting the word photo in scare quotes whenever they use it. And I'll post some examples, but I've been looking at some recent photos and I'm just, like for example, I'm looking at this one of the space station and the space shuttle and the Earth in the background, but it's like, who's the cameraman? Okay, continuing. White drivers are polluting the air breathed by LA's people of color. Fascinating. Again, this is part of a buildup of a connection between BLM and eco-activism. By the way, this podcast is going to be on Spotify. This is the IPS Insider. I may or may not be restreaming these later just to get feedback from listeners, but it's going to be on Spotify. And if you look at the Spotify logo, it's a green circle with 3 lines. Now, these 3 lines are part of a circle. And if you measure it, 33 degrees. Now, I'm not really big into chemtrails. I think I had an epiphany when I saw last winter how the snow machines at the top of Sandia Peak at 10,000 feet are creating a similar effect in a similar way. We're talking about compressed air and water and high altitude at a certain temperature creating these sustainable, just persistent, what look to be clouds. Well, anyway, there are still people who are convinced that there's actually some kind of effect being caused by the planes passing over, whether it's poisoning us or the new explanation is it's geoengineering. And I've been wondering, what's the difference between geoengineering and climate change? Seems like anti-geoengineering is the right-wing climate alarmism. And I see it picking up along with this Ohio thing. And I think what's happening is the right has been conditioned by its own ideologues to avoid environmentalism, to avoid this criticism of capitalism as being bad for the environment altogether. And they have been. But I think that they've been doing this, they've been accomplishing this, I think, by infecting the right with alarmism based on events like Ohio, based on the idea that geoengineering is now the new thing to fear. In other words, they're able to merge the right and the left on this issue with just slightly different explanations. Oh, they don't believe climate change. They laugh at Greta. Well, they don't laugh at chemtrails. And you'll notice the environmentalists are always protesting planes. Well, none of the right has a reason to. And this is another thing I picked up on just by immersing myself with CNN. It's always on in the background. I'm always checking the headlines. On CNN, they're saying that the airplanes are having issues with turbulence. Someone had just died. They're pointing out all these train crashes. And I'm seeing other reports about why is there an uptick in the number of deaths by automobile. So planes, trains, automobiles, all these things are suddenly dangerous. Traveling is just dangerous. And the answer is yes. And even walking, of course, because you're a carbon super spreader. You're a carbon super spreader. You're an idea super spreader. I mean, how many different ways can they convince people not to go outside? I've been saying it's like they want you to have agoraphobia. I'm an algoraphobic. I don't fall for any of it. Now, listen to this. This is just to get back really quick to this chemtrail thing. And this all started because of a sarcastic comment in Discord. Linda C33 and counting, it said, the chemtrail advocates should be masked 24/7, or else I question their beliefs. And I agree with that. I don't believe that you actually believe in the pandemic if you're not locking down, if you're not still masked. Like, how serious was your belief, really? I don't believe you actually believe in climate change if you're still driving around a car. I mean, this is the thing. You can call them out on their beliefs. Like, are they hypocrites or not? That's what really tells the truth there. I saw this headline about 7 or 8 new islands found outside of Japan somewhere. They found new islands. Yeah, it's probably PPE, COVID islands. 57 tons of PPE was dumped in the ocean in the last couple of years. And you're going to tell me these people care about the environment? Because the maskies, the mask Karens, the vax junkies, they're all on the left. But to Linda's point, the chemtrail advocates should be wearing masks. Why aren't they? You're going to tell me that the air is toxic. Where's your mask? Do you hate yourself? Like, are you insane? Where's your mask? But to get to this thing about chemtrails, I was looking at these snow machines, and yeah, they do shoot compressed air through a nozzle where it meets water, splits it into tiny droplets, and the loss of pressure suddenly robs the system of heat. Then it rapidly cools and it forms into these little ice pellets. And we always have these thick clouds all around the top of this peak at about 10,000 feet. Now, I'm just looking at it and I'm thinking, how dissimilar is that from a jet engine? How dissimilar is a fan that's compressing the air, we're talking about compressed air being shot where it meets the water. How different is that from a jet at a high altitude? Is it not the same thing? And then you add to it this. When it's freezing outside and you throw boiling water into the air, the water droplets rapidly evaporate into vapor that immediately condenses into a cloud. Looks like snow, but it's just water vapor. So if you combine these two, jet fuel, the temperature it's at, you're talking about compressed air, it seems to me that there's no reason to assume there's anything nefarious. What would you expect? Would you expect that there would be no effect? Anyway, I don't think that the chemtrail theory has any sort of real scientific basis. I think it's bias confirmation. And it's very apparent now. Jim 2020, the guy that says that Tucker Carlson's a woman and is a 9/11 truther denialist, Jim 2020 is one of the main promulgators of this idea that you can get rid of chemtrails with vinegar. Chemtrails can be cured by putting jars of vinegar in your front yard. He advocates it. Now, you never see him on video doing it, but he says that he does it, so I take him at his word. But their logic here, or their reasoning, if you want to call it that, is that if you put a jar of vinegar outside and maybe just go out and eat a pickle, the chemtrails above your head will disappear. I'm like, how does that work? Like, what's in the vinegar that has a 5-mile range? Oh, this is 10,000 feet. Oh, it's 10,000 feet above, it'll change it. But this is where they're tricked. This is how the transvestigators transduzel their followers. This is how the neo-Nazi demagogues convince their followers to see a Jew everywhere. It's the same trick. It's suggestion. Like, look, you can point at a cloud and say, I'm going to point at the cloud and think really hard till it disappears. It's going to disappear. Now, did you do it? Or was it going to disappear anyway? In the same way, I could point at the sun and I can declare, you know what? I'm going to make that thing set. And I could point at it and it's going to go down. But because I said something, does it therefore logically follow that I caused it? No. That's a deliberate confusion and conflation of correlation and causation. And this is how they're getting all these false positives. They're lying to themselves. The Mandela affected are lying to themselves. The transduzeled are lying to themselves. Their cognitive bias is running amok, and it has replaced reason in this selective way. They're convincing themselves and then basing their gut felt intuition and their friends' affirmation of the same, and they all see it, they all agree, They're taking this and they're running with it, and they're forming a worldview about it. And anyone who doesn't agree to the growing mob is now one of them or ignorant. And this is what you have with the religions. You have those who are ignorant and might be converted later, and then you have those who have seen the doctrines and rejected it, and they're enemies. This is classic us versus them. That's why they say it's all of them. They have to think in generalities, which technically is not thinking. It's not thinking at all. Thinking in stereotypes isn't thinking. The stereotype is actually a thought-saving device, a labor-saving device. It's too much work to think about this. It's too much work to get facts. Let me go ahead and generalize to save time. I mean, this is why racism is unintelligent. This is why collectivism is unintelligent. When I mean I'm not referring to IQ. I'm talking about the amount of information or intel that you have. We have one fact about this group and they're that color, versus we have millions of facts about hundreds of thousands of people and all of their individual proclivities, idiosyncrasies, and patterns of behavior. Individuals. But no, they don't see individuals, they have groups. And what the transducer do in this instance is they decided that the elite are one group. It's not men, women, different religions. No, it's all one group, and it's, quote, all of them. They're not thinking. And when they're not thinking, they're responding emotionally. And their emotion is scary evil needs to be exposed because it's a scary world. It's a fear-based worldview. Actually, it's with transvestigationism. You don't see the fear so much because, as you do with those who are merely exposing satanic symbols or ominous hand signs. With that, you do see more of a fear-based outlook. But with this, there's more of a mockery-based outlook. They're mocking them. There's a lot of that, which makes me see it as less of a fear-based worldview and more of a pious, we're saved, they're not. And it's also more of a purity thing, very puritanical, very judgmental. Not unlike the Calvinist group, Westboro Baptist Church, where either you were one of them or you're one of their enablers. And it left them with a very small compound. But it was them versus the world. And they were content with that. A cult of that size, a few dozen people, a few hundred people, 10,000 people, a cult of that size doesn't really need the outside world to confirm or deny whatever it claims. It doesn't need that validation. It's internally able to sustain itself. It's an echo chamber. And there are so many echo chambers. The world stage is the biggest echo chamber of all. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I will be live as soon as I'm able to get to a slightly better Wi-Fi location. I'm going to go try the place near the library. All right, have a great day.